Good evening. Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. Tonight we have Stan Bajerski talking to us about environmental issues common in home inspections. Um, if you have any questions during the webinar, you could break in. Just make sure you mute yourself when you're done with your question, or you can type your message in the chat bot and I will moderate your question for you. We have certificates will be going out tomorrow morning. If you do not get your certificate by midday, email me. Some people have been having some problems, but they do go out. I have a list of everybody here. We also have our logos now on our site. So we have one for every webinar that we're doing. Environmental Issues has one. And if you go to our site, you'll see it under logo downloads. And the password is Cornerstone. It's a password protected page. Also, if you go to our website, you'll see exciting news about our upcoming law seminar, which is being held October 10th at Mohegan Sun. You'll have the opportunity to earn 7 credits at this all-day seminar. We have 2 wonderful speakers, and then we'll have the law seminar. And that information's on our website. If you look, you can find the Mohegan seminar and find additional information there. So I'll turn it over to Stan and have you begin.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about environmental issues, the common ones that come up during a home inspection. And I'm sure if all of us who have been in business for any length of time have ways to address all these things. Most state standards, I think all of the state standards in the 33 states that are regulated, they indicate in the standards that the testing or finding these environmental issues are not required to be part of the inspection. So you do need to have a way to bring that to your client's attention, whether it's when you're talking to them on the phone or doing your home inspection. Most state standards will also tell you that they're not going to prevent you from testing for these things as long as you as an add-on, as long as you have the education, the training, the expertise, and providing these things, these testing, so on and so forth, accurately.
Stan, let me just interrupt. I guess some people are having problems with some echo. If you're having problems with echo, try turning down your volume control. Thanks. Go ahead, Stan.
Okay. So today we'll be talking about, this evening, radon, mold, buried oil tanks, lead, and asbestos. So these are all, you can classify them as health and safety considerations. And it's funny that they fall under that category because I'm hearing a lot nowadays from my clients and their realtors that the things that we're able to negotiate from my inspection will be health and safety concerns. And I can almost put anything that I find under some kind of health or safety concern, but at least these guys will fall under that. Okay, Jim. So this, to discuss or not to discuss, that is the question. Most SOPs exclude addressing environmental issues during a home inspection. However, if you do not, you may not work because your competitors are probably talking about it. So you want to figure out a way to, even if you're not capable of testing them, how to incorporate that in your inspection process. Okay, Jim. The general limitations and exclusions of Connecticut's SOPs, the inspection is performed in accordance with the regulations that are not technically exhaustive. And there's a list of things that the inspector does not have to do. So we'll go down to the highlighted parts And it begins with the presence of potentially hazardous plants or animals, including but not limited to wood destroying organisms or disease harmful to humans, the presence of any environmental hazard, including but not limited to toxins, carcinogens, noise, contaminations in soil, water, and air, radon, mold, asbestos, lead paint, or lead solder. The effectiveness of any system installed or methods utilized to control or remove suspected hazardous substances. There's an error on that that probably will never be corrected, but it shouldn't be just lead solder. It should be lead containing materials. And the operating cost of the systems or components that may be in place, like a radon reduction system or any type of warning equipment or the type and presence of spillage detectors that might be related to those components. Okay, Jim. So I put this in my report. I have a page in my report that will address all of these concerns that are on this page. And so the Connecticut Home Inspector regulations do not require, we'll go through that again. So I put a little description of what each environmental issue is for my clients to read. We've already talked about this, but it's in the report as well. I believe in redundancy. You can't talk about it. But if it's not recorded, then nobody said anything. But if you put it in your report 2-3 times, you can miss it once, but you can't miss it 3 times. So I believe in that. I've been doing that for 37 years, and it's been very, very good to me. So
it could be, my feeling is it could be a little bit of a tricky situation, which I even had come up today with the future inspection. And when I send out my paperwork, it says all this stuff, that all this stuff is excluded. But then what I do say is, in my price, I will look for mold, I will look for termites, I will look for asbestos. And I had a client call back today. She goes, well, I want the mold testing. I'm like, it's a mold investigation. I'm looking for visual evidence of mold. If you'd like testing, that's separate. So, we are looking for some of these things. And your clients expect you to address some of these things too. Many inspections, people will go, well, what do we do about the lead paint? So in this webinar, we're going to go through that.
Well, right. And that's absolutely right, Jim. And I think at first you got to let them know and make sure they're aware that we do not have to incorporate testing for these things as part of the standard or general home inspection. And, right. There'll always be somebody to try to jump the hurdle. And, I will tell people when I talk to them on the phone that the only thing I test for is radon, and I will test well water. All the other stuff, if we find an issue and you want to test for it afterwards, I'll tell you who, may be capable of doing that. And if they want it done during the inspection, at that time, they'll have to hire somebody to come out at the time of the inspection. But so my disclaimer says Connecticut Home Inspectors regulation do not require the inspector to identify the presence of any environmental hazards, including but not limited to toxins, carcinogens, noise, all the other stuff that we read before. And it should not, this is what I had, it should not be misconstrued. I'm sorry. The following environmental issues may exist in a home and may be discussed during the home inspection purely as a courtesy. If any mention of these concerns is included in the inspection report, it should not be misconstrued as a conclusive finding or a comprehensive inspection or test for that particular concern. If identified in one area, it should be considered that it may exist in other areas of the home as well, even if not detected elsewhere during the inspection, as it may be concealed or latent. The reason why I put this in my report is because Jim Scott and I were members of the Connecticut Association for many, many years. One of our members identified asbestos in one location of the house, and I believe it was on some ductwork. And then after these people moved in, it was found in other areas, and he actually lost a lawsuit because they sued and because he didn't tell them all the other locations. And sometimes you got to cover your butt with stuff like this. So you have the opportunity to look at this webinar again. Please feel free to add that if you need to or want to. I think most people will understand the language there, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have it in a report. Okay, Jim. So let's first talk about radon. The reason why I chose to put this first is because for me, I'm going to say 80% of the inspections I do include a radon test. And I use a radon monitor and it makes me money. Okay. I am always been nationally certified for radon testing and mitigation. So I consider myself an expert, so to speak, on radon. I don't have a problem testing for it. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer deaths in the United States after cigarette smoking. I make sure my folks know that when I talk to them on the phone. I tell them it's ahead of asbestos, and they usually kind of freak out about that. So I get their attention. Radon is an odorless and invisible radioactive gas naturally released from rock, soil, and water. In outdoor environments, radon levels are very low and generally not considered harmful. Radon can get into homes and buildings through small cracks and holes and build up to higher levels over time. Breathing in high radon levels can cause lung cancer. Okay, Jim.
I just want to skip in for just a second.
Sure.
I know I'm running across this. Many people are waiving the radon. They feel confident that they're not waiving the home inspection, and they want to put up as little barriers to purchase, especially in the Connecticut market. And I will have agents just sit there quietly and just say nothing. And, you know, I tell them that you can test afterwards, go to Home Depot, Lowe's, get a kit, but remediation, it's going to be $1,200, $1,500, $1,600, depending, you know, on a simple installation. It can be more expensive if it's more, you know, prevalent in the home.
So I've been finding that as well. And just to say it out loud, these people aren't doing that on their own. They're not waking up in the morning and saying, I want to waive a home inspection or I want to waive the radon. They're being coerced into that by the real estate community. But to be honest with you, today, these people got to do what they got to do to get a house. I'm getting too many stories about how many they lost bids because they wouldn't waive a home inspection. So when they get one, you know, the radon, they can always test later, just like you said. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most radon testing is performed by home inspectors as part of a home inspection. And when I was in the radon mitigation business, 99% of our work was generated from tests performed for a home buyer during a home inspection. I can only remember a handful of people, owners who tested their own home, found that it was high and called us and had us put in a radon mitigation system. So we are the generators of the radon testing, in my opinion. And if, you know, we're kind of used to what goes on here in Connecticut. And radon testing, at least for me, is big. But in reality, I think 15 to 20% of the tests that I do come back elevated. There are other parts of the country where it's not, do you have radon? It's how much do you have? It's a big, huge industry. And sometimes that drives pricing down when you have so many competitors. But if you look at this map, you'll see it's hard to tell where Connecticut is, but I think we're in the moderate zone. And all the blue is the low zones where you would probably not have a lot of radon. And then the high zone is the pink, where in those states, it's how much do you have?
Yeah.
So that probably is part and parcel, or maybe there's other companies that do those out there because there's more ability, more market out there. But it does change from region to region, and sometimes I forget those things. That the way we do things here in Connecticut, or the type of construction that we have, is different than other parts of the country. So with radon testing, there are two national agencies: the National Radon Safety Board NRSB, and the National Radon Proficiency Program, NRPP, that provide radon testing and mitigation training and will provide certification after completion of their course. Some states may require certification for radon testing, so you should check with your local agencies. Here in Connecticut, if you want to be on the state list for radon testing, you have to be a member of one, certified member of one of these two companies, organizations. And so, for instance, I was the NRPP for a long time, and then I went to NRSB, and I've been certified for over 20 years, and I have exhausted all their courses. And at some point, they should just say, "Hey, just do this 5-minute thing, and we'll give you your certificate," because it doesn't change much. Once you learn how to place the radon test, you know how to place it.
Connecticut, if you don't want to be on the list and you just want to set in residential, you don't have to be certified. That's my understanding.
Right, and I don't think anybody checks either. But here's what: if you did a test and you were not certified, the first thing and somebody called, your client called the state and asked for more information. They didn't call you after the test came back. The first thing the state's going to ask is, was it a certified radon tester? And if they say no, then they won't even talk to them. They will tell them to get it.
What if it comes from a lab? If you're getting your test kit from a lab and you're not using an electronic.
Can I chime in on this one? Stan,
Yep, sure.
I'm NRSB, and I can tell you that what he's saying is true. It's also a liability thing too. You really want to test. If you want to test, you should be one of these two organizations, in my opinion. Because if little Johnny gets lung cancer because you did a bad test or something, you got nothing to hang your hat on. And NRSB is pretty good. I don't know much about NRPP. I mean, Stan, you were a member for a long time, so I'm sure you can speak more on that. But I would think if you're going to test, you should, just for your own protection as a home inspector, you'd want to be certified in something, one of these two.
I agree. And I think it just lends some credence to your credentials, but they're both similar. NRSB is a little bit cheaper, but the content is basically the same. But my point is that once you learn how to place the devices and why you need to place them the way they are being placed, it's I guess a matter of refreshing, just like us having this course right now. I don't think anybody needs to be told what to tell somebody when one of these environmental issues come up during a home inspection, unless you've only done 5 and you're still figuring that out for yourself. But it doesn't hurt to hear these things over and over again. It just solidifies what you're doing or gives you an opportunity to change and improve.
But Jim was mentioning something about a lab. I mean, that's for canisters or other things.
Yes,
I mean,
correct.
many of us use electronic devices, Jim. So we do our own stuff. We just have to have them calibrated, and then we have to pass it. The other thing too, Stan, with NRSB, as you know, we have to not only take the course, we have to pass a test, or they pull our certification every 2 years or whatever it is, every 2 or 3 years.
We had them come down and do a course for any Kahi guy that wanted to renew their certificate. The other thing is, even if you're using canisters in a lab, they require that you give blanks to the lab and things of that nature, so the lab can maintain their credibility in testing quality assurance. So they do require certain things, but in the grand scheme of things, unless somebody turns you in or somebody asks, and that doesn't happen a lot, anybody could go and test. They don't have to be a member of these two organizations. So,
Gotcha.
but I would, if you have the money and the time, it doesn't hurt to be a member. So how to test for radon? There are basically 2 ways to test for radon, or device-wise. The passive devices here on the left, and a radon monitor, which is a Sun Nuclear on the right. There's a ton of different models now. I have always used the Sun, and I will continue to, because I don't have much longer to go, to be honest with you. So I'm at a race to see if my monitors outlast me. in the home inspection field. Passive devices can be obtained from a lab. They are deployed for 48 hours as well, minimal, and retrieved and mailed back or dropped off at the lab if they're local. Continuous radon monitors are deployed for 2 days as well, but after retrieval, you'll test results the same day. CRMs are relatively expensive and require yearly calibration. I don't, if you put 4 or 5 different test devices out in a house, they actually have the opportunity to come back at 25% difference to a certain extent. So you can't say that one is better than the other. There are different advantages and disadvantages, but this is what is available out there. Now, if you don't want to test, then you should have somebody that you can refer people to do the testing, whether it's another home inspector or a lab that will go out and do the testing as well. Because again, if you don't, you may not get the job because other guys are capable of performing that test.
Exactly.
I've tested that theory, by the way. They used to say that canisters used to be higher than the electronic devices. And I throw canisters next to the devices every now and then, and they're pretty close.
I test my house with both every year.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much the same from year to year. So my house doesn't change and the devices are very close to the monitor. Yep.
And are you mentioning also radon water testing?
Well, that's part of my well water testing.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we're not going to talk about today. I should have put it in there, but okay, Jim. Next slide.
We're actually going to be having a radon webinar in December. So
radon and water and air and water testing.
Yeah,
so.
it'll be very intensive.
Our director of education will be handling that one, Scott.
If you're viewing this as a recorded event, your view code is EI 305013.
So for me and a lot of other people, radon testing is a moneymaker. Okay, and it's not a hard sell because it's the realtors are telling people to have a radon test. So I think that most guys are probably providing some type of radon test. Now, mold. Next slide, Jim.
Sorry.
So just to go over mold to fill out the hour. Mold spores, which are present in all indoor environments, land on damp spots and begin to grow. Molds reproduce by means of tiny spores that float through the air. Mold requires water or moisture to grow. Most molds are made up of filaments and reproduce through the production of spores. Mold can find its way into your home through various means. Here's how it typically happens. Spores from outdoors. They're part of the natural environment. They reproduce by releasing tiny spores. These spores float through the air, both indoors and outdoors. So once you open a door or a window, you're going to have mold spores in your home. You're not going to see them. If they are even visual, they're probably going to look like part of the dusty shelves that you see in a house. They can enter your door through windows, doors, and even through heating and air conditioning vents. They hitch a ride on air current and settle wherever there's moisture. That's not true. They settle everywhere, but the mold will grow if they find that moist environment that they like. And the key to mold control is moisture control. If your home experiences water damage, leaks, floods, high humidity, it creates favorable conditions for mold growth. Fixing water problems promptly and drying wet areas within 24 to 48 hours helps prevent mold from taking hold. So I'm going to talk about when I got into business, which was 37 years ago. Mold itself was not a issue as far as a health concern. People weren't freaking out if we found mold in the house. Mold was always a part of a concern for moisture intrusion or some kind of plumbing leak or high humidity in the house. So if we saw it, we mentioned it, but we tied it to some kind of water problem. Okay, Jim. There's probably some repetitive information here. So potential health effects and symptoms associated with mold exposure include allergic reactions, asthma, and other respiratory complaints. So people who may be living in that house, who may have children with asthma or things of that nature, are usually the people that are most concerned about the presence of mold in a home. There is no practical way to eliminate all mold and mold spores in the indoor environment. If mold problem in a home, you must clean up the mold and eliminate the sources of moisture, fix the source of the water problem or the leak to prevent mold growth. So if you're talking to a client about mold, especially if you find that these are kind of the things that you would probably want to know and be able to articulate in some way, shape, or form so that they know how to handle things from that point on. Reduce the indoor humidity to 30 to 60% to decrease mold growth. Venting bathrooms, dryers, and other moisture generating sources to the outside. So for me, that's part of my inspection as far as venting is concerned. It's not just attic venting, it's the dryer vent, it's the bathroom vents. We're going to look at all of that and make sure that they're functioning properly as best as we can tell. Using air conditioners and dehumidifiers, but we all know that some people don't have air conditioning. They're lucky to have maybe one window unit in their bedroom. You may come across those conditions. Increasing ventilation in the attic if it's poor, and using exhaust fans whenever cooking, dishwashing, and cleaning. Clean and dry any damp or wet building materials and furnishings within 24 to 48 hours to prevent the mold growth. Clean mold off hard surfaces with water and detergent. Dry completely. Prevent condensation in areas where there are perpetual moisture problems. Do not install carpeting. Do not install anything that can add to the humidity of that area, and mold can be found almost anywhere and virtually on any substance. Okay, Tim. So the turning point, a lot of things happened after I got into this business. Within the, I got in 89, within the middle of the 90s, all these things started to develop. There was an infant, and I believe it was in Chicago, but I don't really remember for sure, that was in a crib in a bedroom, and the supply duct for that room was right near that crib. And the return air was being taken directly from the basement, and the basement was moldy, damp, and wet. So that baby was being bombarded with mold spores, and you know, they were probably a little bit more dangerous because they were some actively growing mold spores. And that baby became ill and eventually died. And I remember the story, and I remember that we started getting a little bit more concerned about mold. And I remember thinking, oh, mold is going to be the next asbestos. And sure enough, I think we have a handle on it now, but for a while there, it got a little crazy. And I had people bringing in labs testing for mold, and now the home inspectors are doing it. But this is another potential moneymaker. If you want to go out and buy some equipment, you can do a mold test for people. I think you need to know exactly what you're doing and what the premise is when that report comes in. But it's another another add-on where you could make money. Jim does it. Jim can tell you a little bit more about his charges and what he spends on that equipment.
So a couple of years ago, we started getting a lot of advertising from Sporosite out in Utah, and I decided to make the investment into the equipment, which is not a lot. I think for a total of around, with everything, it was about $250 to $300. The nice thing about that company is the equipment that they've developed is specifically for home inspection. So when I get to a house, I'm doing the outside, I set my equipment up and I do a control sample. I just hit a button and it runs for 5 minutes. If I want to run it longer, I can run it in 5-minute increments. I don't have to sit there and watch it and time it and turn it off. It's automatically timed. Then I come into the house and I can pick my spots. I'm going to pick the main level or the upstairs or a bedroom or where we think there's problems. But the nice thing is, while that machine is running, I can I can inspect. I don't have to sit there. I can do my home inspection. I can look for mold, take pictures, whatever I want to do, and then come back to the machine, tighten up the cassettes. And what's nice about it is the company supplies you everything. Um, then you mail that in. Usually it's you can do a next day or a 2-day. I do the next day air. They get it. They have newer technology through artificial intelligence, and the report that they put out is so easy to read and so user friendly, that I browse it over, then I send it to the client and we go over it. I do 2 inspections. I do a mold inspection where I'm going throughout the house and I'm looking at every aspect of it, bedrooms, attic space, basement, just like a home inspection, but all I'm doing is I'm looking for mold and I'm taking pictures and I'm documenting. And there's a bunch of information I take down, what the temperatures are, the humidity. I have a meter to read that. But what's nice about it is I get $150 a sample, minimum 3 samples, and I got about $20, $60 with shipping. It's about $80, $85 cost on that. And some people, they'll want 5 or 6 tests. They want every room done. I'll do every room for them, but it's $150 a read. So I never got into it before because the equipment was very expensive. I didn't have much demand for it. I didn't want to sit there and watch it, but I did take a certification course. The company has many online videos to go through on how to use it. The customer service was excellent, but I'm sure there's local companies that can handle it too. But I don't get a lot of calls for it, but it's nice to have the equipment in case they wanted to. It's not, I don't want to lose an inspection because I wanted to get the mold testing, and this way we're going to go with somebody else because they do the mold also. So most of the time, probably on around 95% of my inspections, I tell them, here's the price. I look for mold, termites, and asbestos. That's included in the price. And that's how I run mine. And if I find mold visually, then we can do mold testing if they want. Or just call a remediation company in and they'll do the testing and they can remediate at the same time if they feel. But it's definitely a moneymaker.
So we're not here trying to sell you guys mold testing,
no, I'm just telling you what
but
I do.
it is an option. It is a separate add-on income, and it doesn't have to be restricted to a home inspection. You can do it for anybody that wants a mold test. You can even petition your realtors that if they need something other than a home inspection, they need a mold test to follow up or something, you can provide it. So you can you may come across a growth or discoloration that you believe is mold. Visual identification of potential mold is a no-brainer, but should we be checking for hidden mold? Can there be a significant mold problem without visual indication? The reason why I brought that up is because I've had several occasions in the last year, and two realtors send me reports where there was no visual mold, but the mold air sampling came back as elevated in the indoors over the baseline sample from outdoors, and these people were pitching a hissy fit because they can't see any mold. And then where else could it be but hidden inside a wall cavity or in a ceiling or something? And from up until recently, I would think that there would be some other kind of indication, some discoloration on a sheetrock or a molding or something that would tell me an issue is going on someplace. So you got to have answers for situations like that when people ask, you didn't see any mold. Where is it if it's high? And I don't think there's a straight answer, and we're not tearing walls down to try and find it. I mean, you can use a moisture meter, I guess. So it gets a little tricky, and you want to at least have some kind of answer ready if a situation like this comes up. There's a lot of guys doing mold testing as part of their home inspection out across the country. So, all right, Jim, next slide. Buried oil tanks. Again, when I first got into business, the home inspectors were finding evidence of oil lines coming through a wall or actual in-service oil. Where's the oil tank? And there's none in the basement. Well, it's outside. And then when somebody started publicizing that they could be leaking and contaminating soil, and the realtors jumped all over that. I guess when they went in to list the house, they would address the situation and try and at least get the ball rolling to address it before they put the house on the market or during the sale of the home. So a lot of times it was already in progress. The testing of the tanks was the big thing first. So they used to, if the tank tested okay and wasn't leaking, it stayed in the ground. And then all of a sudden, we weren't testing anymore because somebody said, oh, you can damage the tank with the way you're testing it. So it was just, let's take it out kind of situation. Next slide, Jim. So basically, if I'm doing a 1928 house and it's on gas, I'm automatically telling them they got to find out if it was on oil before and if a buried oil tank was taken out at that property. But so even when the home is on natural gas, the inspector must still be diligent when inspecting the property for evidence of a current or previously buried oil tank. So you look for oil filled pipes on the exterior and the vents, 2 small patch holes in the foundation, 2 copper lines protruding through the foundation, newer oil tank in the basement. If you see a newer style oil tank, you want to know where the old one was. That's just automatic for me. And most of the time, my client, somebody goes, oh yeah, we have the paperwork. Well, why wasn't it disclosed then? Because then your clients are surprised right now. They should have known before they even put a bid in on the house that there was a buried oil tank that was removed or maybe left in place and filled. So we don't, even if I don't find evidence of that and I see a new tank or the house is gas now, I still put my report that they should follow up on that. And they understand why. Go ahead, Jim, next. So there are home inspectors in the country, I don't know if there's any around here, that sweep the ground for the presence of, I'll say, an oil tank. It could be anything that they're going to find, but to look for buried oil tanks. They're probably using the handheld unit, which is cheaper for like $1,400 rather than that walk behind unit, which is $19,000. And it'll show up, it's like a sonar, it'll show some mass under the ground. And then you still got to prove it's an oil tank, that it's not something else, septic systems, abandoned septic tank. But there are guys that are sweeping the ground. I would have to say that's really not a moneymaker. I don't know how often. I mean, would you sell that with every job? I don't know. I would stay away from that. But
yeah.
So lead. People are concerned about lead. In my area here, there's still a lot of lead mains. Supposedly, the water company knows about them and they test them periodically. Next slide, Jim. It is strictly a health issue. Lead poisoning occurs when lead builds up in the body over months or years. Even small amounts of lead can cause serious health problems. Children younger than 6 years are especially vulnerable to lead poisoning, which can severely affect mental and physical development. At very high levels, lead poisoning can be fatal. Lead-based paint, that used to be what most people were concerned about because kids can chew a windowsill with lead paint. If you had lead painted windows and doors, the friction when operating them created a dust, so an infant can actually breathe it in. The infant doesn't even have to chew the paint. And I remember when I first got into business, we were looking at 4 feet down on the walls and at the ceilings for the condition of the painted surfaces, and we'd make our recommendations based on what we saw there. I'm going to say several dozen times in the beginning, people used to bring in labs with the x-ray machines to go through. They would spend an hour and a half there and take about 300 samples. And next slide, Jim. Go to the next one. The lead sources are more than lead paint and more than lead solder. lead in foods, cosmetics and medicine, lead in air and soil from lead, leaded gas and aviation gas, stained glass, poison jewelry, lead solder, lead pipe, lead paint, and those are very common in older homes. So I let people know that what we may look for in a home inspection, we're not going through people's um, personal items to see where lead may be, and they probably have a bunch that they're bringing in the house. You never know.
Oh.
Next slide, Jim.
Yep. Okay.
So again, a turning point was in 1992 when they developed the Residential Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act, also known as Title X. I remember this was like 3 years after I got into business, and the real estate profession was in a tizzy because 80% of the housing market at that time would have fallen under um, the 1978, lead paint thing that would potentially be contaminated with lead paint. So they didn't know if they were ever going to sell another house without some full blown test and gutting of the house and getting rid of all the lead. And it certainly didn't turn out that way. But in the beginning, people were bringing in labs to do what we called lead paint surveys. Home inspectors were doing swab testing, which we got a slide here that Jim, next slide, please. So
Yep. So
go ahead.
go ahead.
All right, view code.
Here's a viewing code, EI 305026. We also had a question on Spore site whether they certify you as well. No, they just sell the equipment. You would get certification separately. My only comment on lead is I'll do 100 home inspections and no one will say anything about lead. And I'll run into one client who will just make my life miserable because of lead. It's just terrible. They both won't stop. And what happens if it's in the walls? What happens if it's in the windows? And what I tell people is just to relax. Let me do the inspection, and then we'll have our lead talk. If I feel that there's a huge issue, we're going to call in somebody to test. If I don't feel that there's an issue, then we won't. Then their question is, well, what happens if I do work on the house? Well, in Connecticut, it's my understanding that all contractors had to become lead certified. So they had to take a 2-day course, I believe, $500, so to know how to remediate. But I'm looking at windows, I'm looking at the condition of the paint. I tell people not to worry. You have replacement windows. So it's the opening and closing of the window that's going to cause the chipping paint. Your walls have been painted since 1978. Let's hope they've been painted in the last 6 years, 7 years. So that encapsulates what's in the walls. So you're not going to get sick from that. But we don't want to be, taking down a wall ourselves. We want a licensed contractor to do that. But I've been in inspections where the client has not told me, and they've had a lead guy come out with a gun. He shoots through 20 layers of paint because the house is from 1700 and goes, yeah, there's lead behind there. I'll take a check for $800, please, because that machine he's using is like $35,000. So it's got to make his money back. And not that there's not a reason for that, but you've got to be practical. If you've got all replacement windows and the place looks great and it's been painted and it's a 1960s Cape, there's going to be lead someplace. It's just going to happen. But it's nothing to panic about if it's handled right at the inspection. But go ahead, Stan. I'm sorry.
Well, I think when you have somebody that's that adamant about it, that's concerned about it, we just have to do the best we can to deal with them, because I wouldn't want to dismiss them completely either. So lead testing in Connecticut. Lead inspections are conducted by trained state or local code enforcement officials or by private sector certified lead inspectors or lead inspector risk assessors employed by licensed lead consultant contractors. Lead inspections are performed in response to an elevated blood level. So if there's a health issue, they have to be certified to go out and check that environment for the sources of the lead. I was always told that even if you're a home inspector supplying some type of test for a client, that you should be certified for lead. I don't get involved in it. and I don't want to, um, just because I just thought there was too much liability in it, let somebody else who's set up to take that liability take
A
that
lot of
liability.
Yep.
And then several years ago, when I was still doing, we were doing, I had another company who was doing the radon mitigation and the mold, small mold jobs and termite damage. Contractors in the state of Connecticut had to become lead certified. Anybody that disturbed, I forgot how much was outside and how much was inside, but anybody that disturbed a certain square footage outside or disturbed a certain square footage inside of the walls or painted surfaces had to become certified. There was a point where only like 10% of those contractors were getting certified. So I don't know where that stands right now. And if you were power washing a house that was built prior to 78, you had to collect all the water somehow because it would have lead in it. So there's still some requirements out there. I don't know how hard they're enforcing them. But if you want to get involved in that, you should go through the proper channels, be as certified as you can be, because again, it's another moneymaker that you can add. I just tell people, let's see what condition the painted surfaces are in your house, how, what other things might be potential contamination, and we'll go from there. And they're usually pretty comfortable with that. If there's an issue, I'll tell them, and they probably follow up. But we want to address it somehow with them. So lead swabs, which I was talking about before, they're able to detect the presence or absence of lead in 96.6 of the pieces tested, according to the FDA. The NIST found that the swabs were able to detect lead in paint as well as or better than other methods. The product literature indicated 1 to 2 UGs, sorry, I don't know what that is, of leachable lead can be detected. However, the reliability of home lead tests has come into question in recent years, with more than half of the 300 different home kits tested by the Consumer Product Safety Commission producing false negatives. The positive response criteria for paint containing lead below regulated levels is a demonstrative probability with 90% confidence of a positive response less than or equal to 10% of that time. So I thought about it for a while. I'm going, oh, I buy a box of lead swabs. I go through the house. I don't know what it costs, but I'll triple the cost and I'll make a few bucks. But I decided when I read this not to. I, again, would rather have somebody set up to take the liability if it needs to be done. Next,
just for your FYI, UG really has to do with the it's a unit of mass that they use, and it's basically how many grams of lead there are. And
like PCI,
yeah.
radon, I guess,
yeah.
Whatever that is. Next slide. So here's the
analyzer.
XRF that most labs were using back then, probably still, and the device can cost 10 to 25,000, probably more now. Okay, Jim.
Asbestos.
So asbestos, I think this is the last one. So asbestos is a fibrous material resistant to heat. It was used in a range of commercial products such as insulation, fireproofing materials, automotive brakes, wallboard materials. However, when disturbed, asbestos fibers are highly toxic and can cause respiratory diseases like lung cancer and mesothelioma. The Environmental Protection Agency banned its use in new construction in 1989. Asbestos can still be found in everyday products we use because it was never fully banned in the United States. Today, manufacturers are required to inform consumers when their product contains 1% or more of asbestos material. So if there's less than 1%, you're not going to know. Consequently, items like brake pads and gaskets sold in the United States carry an asbestos-containing material label. Additionally, up to 1% of asbestos is still allowed in certain products with historic use, such as insulation. While this may seem a small amount, any exposure to asbestos can lead to serious health issues, including mesothelioma. It's essential to be aware of the products that historically use asbestos and those that may still contain it to minimize exposure risk and prevent asbestos-related diseases. So, for instance, my father smoked cigarettes for 48 years and died of old age, and there are people who are claiming that they got lung cancer from secondhand cigarettes. So anybody can be exposed to these things, but it doesn't mean because you were exposed you're going to get the diseases related to them. But I think it's a good idea to minimize the risk. I cut through so many asbestos flooring when I was working with contractors when I was young, and I've not been affected by it. My lungs are great, and there's probably people that died from it from less exposure. So it's still in roofing, siding, flooring, and flooring adhesives, pipe insulation, duct insulation, wallboard and joint compound, plaster, popcorn ceilings, wallpaper, insulation, furnaces, and boilers. Do we want to go through all those components when we do a home inspection? So I have a paragraph that says we're looking for high content containing materials, and that I let people know that there's 300 products that contain asbestos that there may be in this house that we're not going to talk about because it's 1% or less, and that's acceptable. So we have sheetrock and compound, we have fiberboard, we have the pipe insulation that I would identify, asbestos shingles on the outside. Even though they're outside, I will talk about them. Asbestos roofing, the tie, and you know what? You also have to, I guess today, I do it, say may contain asbestos, right? Because you don't know until you test. You can be sued by saying it is and then find out it's not, unfortunately. So you're best to use evasive language.
Appears to be.
Appears to be, or may contain, or anything like that. Second row on the left, the ever dangerous vermiculite, floor tiles, fiberboard, asbestos gaskets. This is another form of insulation. That's the insulation they put on boilers. There's a cloth insulation, the cloth that goes over the ductwork. Just there's a lot that we can see that probably has a higher content.
Gotcha.
Those are the things that I would point out. I would also tell them if they're in bad shape that they're more concerned than if they're not, but they are still, probably contain asbestos.
And the other thing you have to remember, and this has happened to me twice in West Hartford, believe it or not. I go into a house, I go into the basement, and the ductwork is gleaming with newer bubble sort of wrap insulation that's sticky on one side, and they've wrapped it all, and there's heating tape everywhere. I mean, it's just gleaming and nice. And I just look at my client, I'm going, there's asbestos underneath there. They're trying to hide it. So just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Just be diligent.
It can be professionally encapsulated, but it's still in the house.
It's still in the house. Yeah.
I don't know how far anybody wants to go to tell people how to do it or what they should do. I think you should always just pass it on to the people that do it and let them take the heat. But so believe it or not, I didn't know this. There are do-it-yourself testing kits for asbestos. I don't even know if I would tell anybody that. I think that's one thing I wouldn't want anybody messing with. I would tell them to have a professional come out and assess the situation if they're concerned about it. And it comes up fairly often in the older homes. So, So disturbing any material that is an environmental concern can cause it to become airborne and potentially contaminate other parts of the building. Sample collecting and testing for most environmental issues should be left to trained professionals. So when we were doing the small mold abatement jobs to fill in days where we didn't have home inspections, I went to the state and asked them if they had standards of practice or anything, and they told us to follow the New York guidelines for mold abatement. And basically the gist of it was to protect your employees or the workers and to prevent the spread of, because don't forget, a lot of their asbestos work was done in multi-apartment buildings. So what they didn't want to have happening is taking asbestos out from one area and spreading it to the rest of those apartments. So you had to take a lot of precautions and, tenting the areas and chambers to walk through and change in and washing stations and stuff like that. We didn't get that crazy, but we only picked jobs that were easy to contain and clean up afterwards because they were small basement stuff and maybe some attic stuff. But the gist is to keep your employers safe and to not spread this through. So again, that's something that these are all conversations, whether you do the testing or not, that you need to be prepared to address. It seemed that it was more, Jim, where'd you go? Oh, there you
I'm
go.
here.
It was more prevalent when I first started, and people aren't, I guess maybe I cut them off at the pass now and talk about it first, but I don't find as many people being concerned, or at least waiting till we do the home inspection to see what's in the house before we panic. So that's how I handle it. And, of course, there's add-ons. And today, when we're all doing less inspections, I'm assuming we all are, that, having an add-on doesn't hurt if you want to pursue that. I would just be as educated about it so I can call myself a professional. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Everybody good? We're a little early, but I think that's okay.
Yeah. We're a little early. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a webinar on PECs. As you can see here, here's the sample of our logo, which again is on the site for download. Put it on your website, and check our website for our newsletter that we just put out, and that should be emailed to you. If not, you can download it for free. And we have the newsletter is really nicely outlined with stories and latest technology and legal issues, and we have a recall section, so we're always developing it, and that comes out once a month, and that's free for download, and we also email it to you. Thank you for attending tonight, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks,
Jim, I
guys.
have
Have a
one
good
quick,
evening. Sure.
Jim, I have one quick question. I'm watching a video and then submitting it. Just type up which one you watch and the 2 codes and send it to you for credit.
Yep.
Okay, great. I got to catch up on a few.
Have at it. Go for it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, evening.
Good night.